Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Now today's video is an update on living with my Mark 8 Golf GTI CLUBSPORT. The last one was posted at the end of July when the car had done about 5,000 miles. It's now on nearly 10,000 miles and is almost due its first service, so there is a lot to talk about. But before we do that, I'd like to remind you, if you haven't already, please do subscribe, and while you're at it, click that notification icon, because this car isn't going anywhere in the foreseeable future, so there'll be a lot of good content on the channel very soon. Okay, as you can probably tell, it's been a very busy few months. So in August, I visited Racing Line in Milton Keynes, where the car was put on their dyno, and it produced a very healthy 316 brake horsepower, so 20 up on the factory figures for a totally standard car with 6,000 miles on the clock. A couple of weeks later, I got a call from Christian at BOTB, the company where they give away cars in competitions. He'd had a winner of a Mark 8 Golf GTI CLUBSPORT, but he didn't have a car that he could show them when he told them they'd won. So I drove down to central London one Friday morning, and we did the whole spraying of champagne and a load of money in the boot thing, and that was really good fun. Since the last update video, the car's done 2 track events. I wouldn't say track days because they're only a few hours each. The first one was at Bedford Autodrome when we did a comparison with the modified Golf R. If you haven't seen the video, check that out. The last was in September, and it featured Joe Achilles, who took me out in his BMW M3. So if you haven't seen that video, check that out as well. It's a really good one. This car actually performed really well on track until the driver didn't perform so well, and I went off the track, albeit briefly. There have been a couple of modifications. Firstly, the Vosens wheels have been put away for the winter because they're very delicate, and it's now running some Racing Line R360 wheels, which cost I think like £1,200, so about half the price of the Vosens. So I'm not as precious over them. They're not diamond cut, so they should be pretty durable through the winter. I'm continuing to use the Goodyear Eagle F1 asymmetric 5 tyres, which are on the Vosens. I find now it actually got cooler. The pressure drops from what they should be 41 psi to 38, just because we went from sort of the summer 20s to the autumn sort of low 10s, and I found the car drove a lot better on 38 psi. On 41 it is a little bit too brittle, the ride, so if you're running 19s, just try it a little bit lower on 38, you'll find it's a lot better. The other modification is to the number plate. Now some of you may know the Golf GTI CLUBSPORT was originally going to be called Cup, but literally just before the cars hit the streets in late 2020, they for some reason decided to call it Club Sport. Unfortunately, by that time I'd already bought a number plate off DVLA that said GT18 Cup, GTI 8 Cup, which would have been really cool if they'd actually called it the Cup, but they didn't. Anyway, I don't really care, and I thought I'd put it on the car, and I tried it out a bit before I put it on just to make sure it was all right. I did a poll on Instagram, and I think it was like 72% in favour of me doing it. So that's what I've done. Okay, let's now talk about the problems. Okay, so we can divide problems into old problems, which are the ones that were reported in the previous update videos, and new ones that have occurred since that last video dropped at the end of July. Now that video has proven very, very popular, and because of that I felt it only fair to give Volkswagen UK press office the opportunity to respond. I don't like posting negative videos about a brand that I love, but I also insist on telling the truth in my videos. I was hoping they'd be able to come back with some positive news from the engineers at Wolfsburg who are working on a fix, and it would be distributed amongst owners by the end of the year, but unfortunately, because that video dropped in July and I contacted the press office in early August, they said because the whole of Europe is on holiday for the next few weeks, they couldn't get any response. It's 4.5 months later now though, and I still haven't had any response, so I can't give you any positive news on that, and I still don't know when the traffic sign recognition fault, that's the big problem that has affected this car since it was new, when that's going to be fixed. Now the good news is that it's not actually been too much of a problem over the last few months. There was one occasion when I was driving down the M1 from Northampton to Milton Keynes in a 60-mile-an-hour roadwork section, and the car decided to slow down to 37 miles an hour with lorries right up the back of me, which was a bit scary, but thankfully since that occurred in probably mid-August, it hasn't done anything weird like that since. Interestingly, when I had the Audi S3 from Audi UK a couple of weeks ago for review, that every time you started it said traffic sign recognition fault, and I have a feeling they disabled it deliberately on that car to stop journalists having the same experience I'd had with this car, because it's not exclusive to the Golf. That problem, as the comments from that video have confirmed, it's right across the Volkswagen Group range. So ID3, S3, A3, I suspect Leon as well. So yeah, it'd be good if Volkswagen fix that pretty soon. It still does have a problem though with national speed limit signs, because over here they can be 60 or 70 miles an hour. In Germany they just mean de-restricted, no speed limit. So clearly the Germans have had a problem programming this car to understand that. And what happens is that you'll be driving along at 70 miles an hour on something like the A14, a dual carriageway. It will suddenly decide that it should be 60 miles an hour and slow you down. And it just takes a bit of time for you to realise that. And if you've got a car right behind you, it's not ideal. So they've still got a fair bit of work to do on that. The parking sensor fault, which has afflicted the car since the moment I drove it out of Cheltenham Volkswagen on the 1st of March, is still there, or at least the fault warnings come on the dashboard, but they do seem to resolve themselves without having to even turn the ignition off, so that is good. And that's the same with some other faults that occur sporadically. So in the last couple of days I've had travel assist not working, malfunction, but then if you press the button on the steering wheel it does work. So it seems to be logging or displaying faults error messages on the dash, but actually the systems seem to be working, which I guess you could say is progress. One of the most annoying issues, but not dangerous issues, I've had with the car is the Esim server connection dropping out. It does that with this disturbing double click through the speakers, which sounds like you've just been hit by a stone, and then it you lose the icon on the screen that says you're connected to the Volkswagen server, and then it will bong up SOS malfunction or SOS working, because it's just when it comes back to life it reinstates the SOS function, which is to do with what happens if you have an accident or a breakdown. You can contact some help desk by pressing a button somewhere. So yeah, that's still annoying. It still does that. When I drove to London to help BOTB from Heathrow to central London, it did it 5 times. So there's still an issue there. The good news is there could well be an update already out, because I had a message from Peter at the TT Owners Club, who has access to Irwin, which logs all. You can put your chassis number in, it'll tell you what technical updates are available. He found one that's entitled OCU update. It's got a code of 91CL. And from what I can read, it says something about online services not being available to owners, and that's what this update is for. That was posted by VW in early August, so I just missed it when I went to Cheltenham for my update. So I need to get that done, but I'm waiting to have the service because the car's actually on 9,650 miles now. I'll easily do up to 10,000 in the next few days. So when it's due a service, I'm going to push that probably towards like 10,900 miles, because it's not on its original oil. It had an oil change in August, so I'm not too worried about running it a little bit late, but I still need to be within the threshold, I think, which is 1,000 miles, not to invalidate the car's warranty. So when I get that done, I will have the update done at the same time. Now, if you work in a Volkswagen dealership or you run a Volkswagen dealership and you want to help me out with the service and the software update so we can make a video together showing how good your dealership is, then get in touch. I've got about 3 to 4 weeks, depending what other cars I drive in the meantime, before I have to get the service done. Other problems that occurred in the past are the noisy dampers. So if you go over certain humps, you get this creaking noise from the front suspension, usually quite early in your journey. Well, I've moved house since I first experienced that on a particular hump near where I used to live. I've still experienced it at my new address, but not as regularly, so it's hard to know exactly if it's stopped doing it or whether it's just I'm not driving on the right roads, but I have a suspicion that it's just stopped because the weather is a little bit cooler now. I still have a real big problem with CarPlay though. I use Waze every time I go to work, because even though I know where I work, it tells me if there's trouble on the motorway, and so I just plug it in and hopefully have it on my screen. But when I do that, I just get, when the Waze app is on CarPlay, I just get a black screen and no map. Now you can fix it by pressing an icon bottom right, which takes you into like a home page for CarPlay with the map from Waze in the middle of the screen. If you press on that, it takes you then into the Waze app and you get the map back. That works seemingly most of the time, but there's still got a bit of work to do there on CarPlay. Okay, let's talk about new faults. So a couple of weeks ago, I visited my in-laws. I live about 10 miles from them, and when I was leaving, there was this almighty grunting grating noise from the rear suspension. It felt like a metal tray underneath the car was dragging under the ground. I got out, had a look, couldn't see anything, so carried on. I'd experienced this kind of noise before in cars where a stone gets trapped between the brake disc and the brake splash guard. Well, there's not an awful lot you can do about it. It doesn't cause any problems. So I kept on driving, and that resolved itself within a few miles, thank God, because it's quite fiddly trying to get a stone out from behind a splash guard. But yeah, one to watch. If you hear that noise, don't worry too much. It could just be a stone. Also, in the last sort of month, there's been a rhythmic ticking from the front passenger footwell. And I've managed to narrow this down to something to do with the climate control, because if you turn the climate control off, it stops. So it's probably a flat motor that's sticking a bit, which is a bit disappointing considering how young the car is. Hopefully it'll fix itself, or if Volkswagen have to fix it, it won't involve ripping all that dash out and making it all rattle really badly. A couple of weeks ago I was washing the car. It was dusk, and because I had the key in my pocket, it unlocked itself and put the headlights on, and the right hand headlight I'm not really sure whether it was the DRL or the headlight was flickering, like strobing, so that could point to a possible problem in the future. And recently I've noticed, as it's got colder, there's some creaking from the interior trim as you drive over uneven ground. So as the car goes over uneven ground and the body flexes, you can hear this creaking inside. It doesn't sound very good, to be perfectly honest, especially with such a low mileage. It may relate to the creaking noise that the rear seats were doing before it went in for the software update at Cheltenham Volkswagen, and they lubricated and adjusted the rear seat catches. It's that kind of noise. I think they're doing it as well, but there's definitely creaking from the front of the car as well, which, yeah, doesn't sound too brilliant. Anyway, guys, that's it. Overall, I have to tell you, I'm very, very happy with this car. It's not going to go anywhere in the near future, not with used car prices so high. There was one like this for sale in Lowestoft, which is actually just up the road from where I am now. Same colour, same spec, although standard wheels, same mileage, just under 10,000 miles. They gave that seller a reserve price. This is supposedly a trade price of £35,000. That's £3,000 more than I paid for it when it was brand new. So I can't actually go and buy a newer version of this car, or even a Club Sport 45 should I want to, for anything like what I paid for this. There's also been a raft of price increases from Volkswagen as well, which have meant replacing this car would cost a lot more. So yeah, better the devil, you know, I think when it comes to cars. You know, it does have its issues, but I think by and large it's holding out quite well, and I still really love driving it. I think that's one of the most important things. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this Volkswizard video. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, please do comment, please do share. As ever, please do subscribe and click the notification bell icon, and I'll see you for the next one very soon.